Hello and welcome to episode number 242 of Super Switch Headz, the premier Nintendo podcast on all of the internet. My name is Patrick Knisley.
My name is Jordan Willis.
My name is David Howe, and boy, oh boy, ladies and gentlemen, we have a very special guest joining back on the show for, I think, the third time. Let's welcome the wonderful, the lovely Adam McDorman, ladies and gentlemen. How you doing,
Hi, everybody.
Adam?
Hey, thanks for having me.
Yes, thank you for joining us. Adam, you are here to talk with us about books. And not just books, but books about video games. All kinds, whether it's nonfiction or fiction. We're going to talk about it all, or at least the ones we're familiar with. And in addition to that, we got some news that we're going to talk about. AGDQ happened. We've got some interesting news coming out of surveys and discussions from industry insiders talking about what's happening this year. There's also comments being made by people at Ubisoft we're going to have to discuss. And of course, Palworld is a big thing, so we can't not talk about Palworld. Maybe we don't want to, but we're gonna.
Oh, I want to.
Maybe I don't want to. But before we get into anything else, let's check in. How are we doing? What's going on? How's your week been, everybody?
Pretty good. Yeah, I'm doing all right. Had some nice gaming last night with you, Jordan. I'm sure we'll talk about that at the end of the show. And then, yeah, it was pretty fun. I went to an anime convention this weekend. Yep. IkiCon here in Austin, Texas. I was on a panel with Powerhouse Animation. Got to talk a little bit about the editing process in anime and stuff like that. And so I enjoyed that quite a bit. Got a cool shirt and a magnet and a buff Kirby, as you can see.
Whoa!
3D printed. I was on the lookout for a buff Luigi. This is the second year in a row I've struck out on buff Luigis at this convention, but I did find a buff Kirby.
Nice.
And so that is now mine. How about you guys? How are you guys doing?
Doing all right. We had day 13 and day 14 on the feature film that I'm shooting this past weekend. Was like kind of shorter days. Everything's going pretty well on that. And then, just the regular job, trying to keep up and also give myself time to rest. It's difficult, but yeah, other than that, doing pretty good. How about y'all?
Yeah, I'm doing just fine. I'm trying to think of any highlights. I went to the Games Y'all event, the Austin Indie Games Meetup this past weekend. I went with my son because my wife had to work, and it was at the library, and there was a lot of people there. So we played a couple games, and we didn't stick around too long just because his attention span, and we couldn't necessarily get on every game right when he wanted to, which is fine. But that was cool to see. And other than that, I met with the composer for Monochrome Heights for the game I'm making. And we had a really productive meeting about the music in the game.
Bent Neatly.
Yes, Bent Neatly. I should have shouted him out. And then,
He follows me on Twitter now.
That's some of the big highlights, but things have been going pretty good for me.
I'm good. Work's busy, but yeah, things are pretty chill. Other than that,
I caught a stream of yours the other day when you were putting together that Game Boy, not a Game Boy. How'd that thing turn out for you? Is it working pretty well?
it is together.
Very good.
The firmware is not up to snuff yet, so
All right.
we're waiting for it to become what it's supposed to be.
Very good. Aren't we all?
Well, last week we did an episode about GameCube, about the Nintendo GameCube, broadly speaking, but also about all the GameCube games available on Switch. We got some fun comments, as always, in the Discord. Carosetta showed off a modded GameCube that they made with some custom LEDs, and also talked about liking the Wavebird, which David talked about, and also pointed out that one of the Mario Kart arcade cabinets was basically just two GameCubes stuck together.
Yeah, F-Zero AX was as well. It was the Triforce arcade system.
Sticking with the GameCube for a minute, Cool Uncle Vince mentioned all the sports games. We didn't really get into that, and especially the EA Sports big line of games that were out for the GameCube, like NBA Street Volume 2. And that got some discussion. The Huge 27 also had lots of loves for the GBA attachment, which we talked about. And then over on the YouTube, we got to shout out our friend AVK, who made a nice comment over there. And yeah, if you too want to be shouted out if you, have a book about video games that we didn't cover, or a comment about one of the ones we talked about, something we missed, definitely make a comment in the Discord or on the YouTube, or send us a note and we'll try to shout you out. And then also, we like it if you share the podcast with you got some gamer or Nintendo friends that haven't checked it out. Share it with them, and then head on over to the YouTube so you can see the video version and hit like and subscribe there.
Share it with some people that aren't gamers. See if you can convert them.
Share it with people who hate us.
Yeah. Share it with my enemies just to torture them.
Oh boy. We'll talk about the gaming news. We're going to start off with GDQ. So the twice a year speed running event that raises money for 2 different charities. In January, they do AGDQ, Awesome Games Done Quick, raising money for the Prevent Cancer Foundation. They got $2.5 million raised, which is pretty cool. I think I saw that lifetime they've raised something crazy, almost $50 million for charities. And also
Amazing.
That they're the biggest fundraiser for this foundation and for Doctors Without Borders, which is the one they do in the summer. But anyway, that's cool. But did anybody catch any runs that they want to specifically mention?
I saw one run, and I'll say this because I'm sure David, I don't know if Adam watches, but I watched the one where it was Super Mario 64, but he played it on a drum set.
Yeah, that was pretty fucking cool.
Absolutely blew my mind, because it wasn't just, he's playing through Super Mario 64 on a drum set. He's playing a glitch run of Super Mario 64 on a drum set.
Yeah.
And it was just very impressive to watch. He's
doing all the any percent strats. Yeah.
Yes. So it's like having to be in a very specific spot to glitch through a wall to get a star to be able to keep going forward, or to jump backwards up the staircase to get up to Bowser quicker. And I'm just like, dude, I can't even do this normal. And he's doing it on a drum set. And it's cool. At the beginning, he kind of explained his whole setup and the process of how it works. And, he has different drums coded to different directionals, and then the cymbals are coded to something else. But it was just, I was blown away. The ingenuity of the human spirit is unknowable and endless.
I don't know how I'm going to top that, but I did watch a few runs as well. I caught the Mario Maker 2 glitch showcase.
So cool. I love
which was
that one.
really awesome. We love Carl Sagan. Orbo's Odyssey and Pseudo Regalia both had runs. Those are 2 indies I really loved from last year that are super awesome speed games. So those were really fun to watch. I watched the Tears of the Kingdom run, which was great. I'd never actually watched a full any percent of Tears of the Kingdom since I've beaten the game. So that was really great. And a couple others here and there, like the Mario Wonder run and stuff like that. But yeah, all in all, it was a really great time. And they're all the VODs are on YouTube now. So I'm going to be going back, and I got lots of content for many, many weeks to come. Lots of great stuff.
Very nice. Well, we'll move on to talk about what is currently sort of the game of the moment, and also just kind of a gigantic game period. And that is Palworld. The Pokemon with guns was kind of how it was originally described, but now it's kind of also got a survival arc-like element to it. That's a big part of it, as well as people mentioning other games. But a lot of people have bought it in a short amount of time. And a lot of people are concurrently playing it. It's not broken records, but it's number 3 on Steam.
Yeah, 1 million concurrent players. I think it's sold over 4 or 5 million copies already in less than a week, I think. It's definitely the game of the moment right now. Yeah, like you said. So
that's just kind of fascinating how well it's done. Just kind of coming out of the gates, and how much of a phenomenon it has become. I don't know if viral is even the right word, because, it's not like a game that came out of nowhere exactly. Yeah, I think it was at one of the summer game fests or something like that. We saw the Pokemon wielding AKs or whatever, and we're like, what the fuck is this? Yeah.
Right? But it's currently, very controversial
Yes.
online amongst many Pokemon fans in particular, and just people that are accusing this game of plagiarism, that they've straight up plagiarized Pokemon designs for the monsters in their game. I don't know, would love to hear what y'all's takeaways are on this. We kind of had a little bit of a discussion about this in the Discord, but I'm kind of fascinated by this. I mean, if you look at a lot of the character models, like you can see one-to-one, like where they got inspirations from certain Pokemon for certain characters that are in this game. But I think a lot of people are being like, Nintendo needs to sue. This needs to get taken down. This is illegal. And I really just don't think that that's the case. It's kind of hard for me to really get on that side. Well, yes, I think it's morally bankrupt of what they've done here. It's not like there's no creativity, and they clearly lifted a bunch of designs. It's not like that's the first time anybody's ever done this in video games. You know, I think we talk a lot about, you know, spiritual successors to video games all the time, you know, especially in the indie space. And that's celebrated a lot of the time, even when, you know, character designs are very close to the original games that they're, you know, paying homage to, right? Now I'll say Pocket Pair is known for doing these kinds of games in the past. You know, they made a game called Craftopia, which was very much a Breath of the Wild ripoff. And you know, this doesn't just take from Pokemon; it also takes a lot from Ark and from Breath of the Wild and lots of other things as well. But I just find it kind of fascinating and a little hypocritical that a lot of the people that are really complaining about this, you just don't really hear them talk about when other people do the same thing. It's just this is kind of like the big game of the moment, right? And I don't want to throw anybody under the bus. And I think everybody can have their own opinion on this, but I just don't really quite see what the big deal is compared to a lot of other releases.
I think we saw some of this same sentiment with Genshin Impact of like feeling like it was a ripoff, but I don't think you hear that now, right? Like you don't hear people like you're still playing Genshin Impact, that game ripped off Zelda.
Right.
So maybe some of this will calm down because it doesn't seem like Palworld's going to go away. But I think you're right. I mean, I think Nintendo would have already sued them if they felt like they had a reason to. I do think it sucks because they just look like Pokemon. There's just no I hate when something gets this big that really does kind of feel like somebody was in a room trying to think of how to make money and not like like how to like create art. And I'd love to think that doesn't get rewarded, but it can. Right? So
minimum amount of effort for the maximum amount of profit. I the designs controversy. They are all legally distinct versions of Pokemon. That's like all I could think when I saw the one that looks exactly like Piplup, but like the beak is slightly different and it's like a slightly rounder in shape. And I was like, it's a legally distinct blue penguin.
But Piplup is just a legally distinct version of the penguins from Mario 64. So, I mean,
this is true,
yeah.
But I think the main takeaway for me from this was I was like, this game sold how many units in how many days? Imagine if Game Freak actually gave a shit about quality control on Pokemon. You know, it's just maybe it's a wake up call for them. I doubt it because they're still selling buku bucks doing game busters.
Or just trying anything different. You know, It's like this game is much more of an Ark game than it is a Pokemon game, right? Like it's Ark with Pokemon in it, essentially, is what this game is, right? And so, you know, that's like if Nintendo did something like that, made it like an online game, like I think they would do really, really well. This to me shows the hunger that Pokemon fans or people, Monster Hunter or Monster Farming fans or whatever, like that they have for like a shake up to the system. Right. And so, you know, and it's like, I just kind of don't really believe in IP the same way that like a lot of people do. You know, I think that you should be able to make stuff that skirts that fucking line, right? Like that's why the laws exist in the first place, right? Is like we should be like, you know, just because you don't like something that somebody has to say doesn't mean we need to get rid of free speech, you know? Like you have to like protect the right for people to do things that make you uncomfortable or make you mad, you know? So I think that this kind of stuff is like good, and I think it's poking the bear in all the right ways personally. But I understand why people are upset about it, especially if they're like diehard Pokemon fans, but people have really taken rabid sides on this one.
Yeah, and we didn't get into the controversy yet really around allegations, and I don't know if there's anything to back them up of generative AI use other than sort of the history of the people involved in this being, making a game called like Art AI and stuff like that. But
yeah, the creator of, or one of the leads at Pocket Pair has posted about how much they enjoy generative AI and the kind of stuff that they do, but there's been no real evidence that the characters were made using generative AI. I think there's been a lot of assumption there, and so it's hard for me to really like jump down the guy's throat or anybody at the studio's throat for that when that's a lot of hearsay at the moment, really.
yeah, I kind of want to see how much staying power it has. That's
Yeah.
because I think it'll be substantial, even if 70% of the people that bought it stopped playing it. That's still a lot of people,
And you still sold that copy, right?
Yep. It came out on Game Pass too, which is of note. And also maybe I've heard the criticism that the version on Game Pass isn't as good, and I've heard like it's missing some features and stuff.
Yeah,
and
I
so
think you can only have like 8 people instead of 32 or something like that.
So funnels you to buy the actual version if you're having fun there. So I don't know how I feel about that. Like I don't know that that's a bad thing either. But I guess if you're like a big hardcore Game Pass person, you're like, I buy it so I can play the games. I could see being upset about that. But anyway,
honestly, not my kind of genre, but man, this game looks pretty fun to me, so more power to them. Fuck the Pokemon company. Light a fire under their ass.
They gave the Pokemon guns. So dumb. All right.
Just slap parody on anything.
Yeah.
And then it's legal.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, there was an Xbox developer direct that happened this past week. I actually did not watch this. I just watched a couple of the trailers afterwards, reading about it, because I had to see Indiana Jones, y'all, just to see what this looks like. I don't know. There's other stuff we should talk about maybe here too, but let's start with Indiana Jones. What do we think about this game?
I'm interested. I don't really give a shit about Indiana Jones personally. I don't know about you guys, but I thought it looked really fun, and I really like machine games, and pretty much anything they make, I'll play. So this is a no-brainer Game Pass pickup.
Yeah, right. So if you got Game Pass, all these games are going to be on it that they talked about. I know there were some people that weren't so sure about first person. I kind of get that. Whenever you're role playing a specific character, you kind of want to see them.
Yeah.
See his hat. Yeah.
Yeah. Or the back of them, I guess.
The back of his hat.
I think that would be my main criticism, but I think they're trying to like distance themselves a little bit from the Uncharted series, it feels like, because they're like, okay, well, we're first person, so we're not like Uncharted at all. And it's like, but it's just interesting to see like the back and forth between movies and video games kind of like go in this way as well. I can't think of the last like really big IP that we got a completely bespoke video game for. I guess maybe Avatar. Duh, never mind. I take that all back.
Yeah, that was like a month ago.
Yeah, a month in 2024 game years is like 3 years in normal time. Anyway, I also the other one, if we can move on from that one, the other one I'm kind of curious about is Avowed. It's a new Obsidian game. I really liked Outer Worlds, so I'm kind of curious to see what they got up next. It's supposed to be coming out this year, but the other thing that I just kind of wanted to mention about a lot of this was this year looks kind of stacked for Xbox in the years past where their system has not had that many good exclusive titles. So it's finally seeming like they're starting to kind of put out stuff that's like to compete directly with PlayStation exclusives. So I'm kind of curious to see how that plays out for them this year.
Did any of these stand out to you, Adam?
Visions of Mana.
Yeah, I was like about to say, we got to throw the Visions of Mana to Adam because that seems up your alley. What did you think about that one?
I am usually not a huge like action RPG guy, but the world looks really beautiful. Kind of reminds me of Dragon Quest XI a little bit. So I'm definitely interested in at least checking that one out.
Yeah. That one was one that stood out to me as well. Just visually, I think, I'm not as into the realistic stuff as much. Man, I have good memories of playing the old Super Nintendo. Which one was that?
Secret of Mana.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, man. I'm just glad to see color come back to games.
Yes.
Games are colorful again. And movies are starting to get colorful again, too, which is nice.
Yeah, that's my problem, I think, with a lot of the big AAA, shooty fighty games is they just feel dark and bleak. And I actually know that's what people want. So I get why they do it. That's what those.
If you want
kind of
that, you got
players want.
Hellblade 2, which also does look incredible, and I can't wait to play that as well.
Yeah. Well, I don't know how credible this is, but one of our faves, Hot Girl Videos 69, the video game leaker and sex worker, put out that we're talking about Xbox, that there's been a long time of rumors, actually. It's not just recently, of this rumor for Microsoft putting out a handheld device, but they go ahead and say that it's going to launch this year at the end of the year in either Q3 or Q4. And specifically with a version of Windows with sort of Xbox branded. I know a lot of people have been wanting this sort of thing to happen so that there is a Windows quality Windows based handheld, right? I don't know. Do you think this is real? Do you think Microsoft would want to do this or actually release this?
Yeah, I could see a lot of application for this. I mean, I think that, like not Logitech, but Lenovo and Asus are kind of eating Microsoft's lunch right now when it comes to Windows-based handhelds. Steam obviously has the Linux-based handheld covered with the Steam Deck, but those don't play Game Pass games natively, right? Because that's a Windows-only platform. So it makes sense that Microsoft would put out one of these because they're kind of the only ones that could actually take a loss on these machines and kind of match that low entry point that the Steam Deck kind of has covered right now. Like all these other Windows devices are quite a bit more expensive because they're smaller companies and they can't afford to take the hit for each sale, right? So since Microsoft would be hoping to sell subscriptions with it, sell people on their own platform where they take cuts anyway, I think it makes a lot of sense for them to put out a handheld, and I would not be surprised to see one come out this year.
We're going to move on to talking about the Super Switch, Nintendo's next console, for just a minute. GDC, the Game Developers Conference, does an annual survey of game developers. And one of the interesting things that came out of this survey is they, ask what platform people are making their games for, and of note, I think 66% are making it for PC, 35% for PlayStation 5, 34% for Xbox Series, and then 8% of people responded Nintendo Switch successor. So it doesn't mean that there aren't more, because there would obviously be a little bit of maybe people being afraid to put that down, and also multi-platform games. I don't know how it works when you do this survey and that sort of thing, but it's out there. People are making games for it. Not that we didn't already know all that. But while we're talking about this survey real quick, we all remember the big Unity scare. I think it's kind of interesting to see this, that when they asked about engines, that Unity and Unreal are still about tied in the response. And I guess they had a question about like changing engines, which is apparently a new question they haven't asked in the past. And it wasn't as many people as you might think. Apparently 7% of respondents said they switched game engines in the last year, and 28% considered switching, but I guess didn't. So I don't know if, obviously that 7% is not zero, but I thought that was interesting. And then lastly, just like there were some questions about generative AI and all that kind of stuff. And that's kind of interesting to see the responses. Decent amount of people are concerned about it when they asked if you're concerned about it, like very concerned or somewhat concerned and all that kind of stuff. But also some people are like already using it and stuff. So there you go. There's probably more to dig through, but there's also questions about unionization. I mean, you can get the report.
Where is that? Is that in the?
So you have to be a GDC registered person, which I am, but also you can find people that like share it and share summaries of it and stuff. And I don't think I put that in our notes, and I'm sorry, I just pulled it up here. I could share it to you. With y'all,
so you're saying
want.
is you could be the one to share it with us.
Yes, I can share it with y'all.
Okay, great.
Just go ahead and leak the Super Switch, Patrick. We know you're developing Monochrome Heights 8%. For the Nintendo Switch successor.
With that, we'll move on to some interesting stuff out of Ubisoft. I think, Ubisoft is obviously pushing its Ubisoft Plus, which I guess it's not what it used to be called, right? They got rebranded. Their subscription service, right? I don't even remember what it used to be called.
I didn't even know it was called Ubisoft Plus.
Yeah, it is now, I think. So In talking about this in an interview with gamesindustry.biz, the director of subscriptions, Philippe Tremblay, over at Ubisoft, made some comments that I think have fired up the internet. And I think they're being taken out of context a little bit, but I also, essentially, I understand why people are upset about this, right? Sort of hinting that we want gamers to be, comfortable not owning their own games, right? He says, so it's about feeling comfortable with not owning your game is one of the quotes. That's, he's pushing subscription services. He wants people to subscribe, not own games. And that's earned a big backlash online.
Yeah, this is a very "you guys have cell phones, don't you?" moment, right? Like from BlizzCon, whenever people were complaining about the Diablo mobile game, just out of touch. I mean, just like don't say shit like this, Like, I mean, it's just people. It's gonna make people mad, right? And this is like one of those things where it's like, well, somebody's got to say it, and he like probably felt pretty self-satisfied, like making a statement like this, right? But it's just kind of one of those things that you probably just shouldn't say. That said, he's not wrong. I mean, like, we don't really own any of the games that we even buy digitally. If the thing's shut down, they can pull those in any time. We've seen that recently.
And even some of the physical ones that require downloads and stuff like that, right? Like increasing.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, shit, you play games and Nintendo doesn't want you to play. They'll send people over to your house and destroy your discs.
With a hammer.
With a hammer. With a Nintendo branded hammer. A wooden hammer from Mario. But yeah, I don't know. For me, it's kind of, I just like don't. I can't find myself too worried about the future of this kind of thing. Like, just because piracy's a thing, it's like people are always like, man, you better buy all physical games. You'll never be able to play these games ever again. I'm like, I don't know, man. Like, I think there's always going to be a website where I can download any game that I want to for free. You just got to Google it. But anyway, what were you going to say something, Jordan?
I don't want to put on my tinfoil hat too much, but I've also listened to a lot of just in general about how moving into the future, we're gonna overall end up owning less things and renting more, and how housing companies are just buying houses so that we can just rent from them for forever. And this just feels like an extension of that, and it's like not the future I want to live in. And it just really bummed me out to read that news.
Yeah,
that's it. That's all I wanted to say.
I do think I agree with like a broader perspective of I'm tired of subscription services, right? Like I just want to get cat food and not have like a subscription for cat food or something. You know what I mean? Like I just like, or whatever, like sometimes it's convenient and sometimes it's good, but like, it's just become the main model for distributing everything. It feels like,
He's got to get on Rocket Money and find which subscriptions that you're currently subscribed to.
This episode brought to you by.
Come on, guys. Look, I'm doing it for free. First one's for free. Then you got to start paying us. Come on, Rocket Money.
To bring us back to the topic here at hand, that I thought this was interesting that like the CEO over at Larian kind of like put out like a comment about how, Baldur's Gate 3 will never be on a subscription service. And, so there are also developers who have strong feelings about owning games or, in favor of it and stuff like that. So, and then also Matt Piscatella, like who has all the data, the guy over at Circana, formerly MPD, kind of responded to all this saying that like subscription growth in video games has kind of flattened out. And it's really like 10% of video game spending. So like, maybe that'll change, go up or maybe it'll go down, but he's kind of pointing out that it's not really taking away much, at least now. We'll move on, unless there's anything on all that, to another sort of Ubisoft, but Nintendo related detail that came up when, the Prince of Persia, the new Prince of Persia game just came out. The Lost Crown. The developers for that did like an AMA over on like a subreddit over on like the Metroidvania subreddit or something. And somebody asked the question about like, what game would y'all really want to work with of somebody else's IP? And they said Zelda.
Specifically, they said a strange spin-off based on Adventure of Link, which is, I think, what everybody wants, honestly. I think, I'm not even joking. I think a 2D... Yeah. If they're going to do any Zelda, it should be the 2D Zelda, right? Like the side-scrolling Zelda. But yeah, I mean, this is definitely a non-news thing that's been going around. This is the same as like whenever I was interviewed about like what thing I'd like to work on, and I was like Zelda, and then everybody was like, David Howe, the director of Castlevania, is making a Zelda anime. It's like, no, I just said I'd like to do it. So it's really not news, but people love to. I mean, this is clickbait, right? But that said, I think they would be excellent at it, and I think that if anybody's gonna like remake or do spin-offs of any of the Zelda games, I think Adventure of Link is something that desperately needs another look, right? Because that was such a cool game idea. They only did it once. And, you know, now they've made, Ubisoft Montpellier has made the best, arguably the best Prince of Persia game ever, from what I'm reading from the reviews, and one of the best Metroidvanias in a very long time. I've heard this game might even be better than Metroid Dread in a lot of ways, and that's just what I've been hearing. Jordan keeps giving me stink eyes. I heap praises on this game that I've not played, but I'd like to see them get outside the comfort zone, and I'll play anything by the Rayman Origins devs.
If they get a shot before Grezzo, I'm gonna lose it. That's all I got.
Grezzo can do top down. I don't want Grezzo to do like a platforming action based side scrolling Zelda game. Top
down would be ideal. But I don't know. I haven't played this game either, but it is very high on my list. You just don't besmirch. Is that the right word? Metroid Dread on this podcast in front of me. Maybe on a week when I'm not here, maybe.
Well, I didn't say Metroid Dread was bad. I just said I heard this might even be better.
Okay, we'll move on. We're going to go back to gamesindustry.biz, and they had another article recently that was of interest, where they had some, I guess, insiders, some people that they aren't naming, in particular like investors and CEOs of companies, which makes it sound like 2024 is going to continue the trends we saw in 2023 of closures and layoffs and sort of, I don't know, market correction maybe for all the money that got dumped into games during the pandemic, which is a bit of a bummer to hear. It sounds like there's multiple investors they interviewed that are like, yeah, it's just not a safe bet. We're going to put our money elsewhere and stuff like that.
Yeah, the direct quote in this article was, if 2023 was the year of layoffs, 2024 will be the year of closures, not just developers, but publishers, media, service companies. There are just too many unprofitable businesses in video games. We're looking at up to 2 years of pain, which is a pretty bleak quote there. But I don't think they're that far off. I mean, Jordan, you posted in our thing a little bit ago, another rumor that you'd been hearing about, a big video game crash, and how Nintendo is kind of aiming themselves to take advantage of that upcoming crash in a lot of ways. And I don't think that is far off. I think that is likely what's going to happen. It's really sad to see, but it's also like, this is kind of what happens when, you start chasing the money instead of chasing what gamers really want, as far as live service games and massively budgeted AAA games. And I'm sure we'll be talking about a lot of this more in the future, but it was a pretty bleak article to read, and it looks pretty scary.
There are a couple of guys that I follow who are like indie marketing kind of guys, and they have lots of interesting stats. And I think one of the things too to just be aware of is just the number of games that come out has like dramatically increased, and so this is of note to people that like, are marketing indie games, right? Like, you're going up against thousands of other games this year now, instead of, in the past it was a lot fewer. And I'm trying to find the numbers, but I can't from one of these newsletters, so I apologize, but maybe we'll talk more about that in the Discord or something. But I think that's just another factor too, right? That especially on platforms like Steam and stuff, there's just so many games coming out. It's hard for all of them to be profitable.
And that's just the hentai games.
yeah. Those are the newsletters I get. Okay, we'll move on to talk about the numbers a little bit more, which is Circana, which we just mentioned a minute ago. They put out their December of 2023, which is also sort of the end of the year. So we get to now kind of see, at least in North America, at least with, so the info they have, kind of what was sold well in December, and it was so top games and all that, and hardware and all that. So some of the highlights, maybe y'all had a chance to pull some other ones, but PS5 was the hardware winner for the year. Hogwarts Legacy was the game for the year. Again, I don't know that this would have overtaken it, but they don't have digital info for Nintendo games. So I don't know that Tears of the Kingdom would have been able to make that much of a leap. But I think they said this is the first year that it wasn't either a Rockstar game or a Call of Duty game in like a long time. I can't remember what it was, like 10 or 15 years since that's happened. So I guess that's good. What else maybe of the Nintendo charts maybe we want to talk about? Again, this is just physical, but Tears of the Kingdom is on top. Mario Wonder in second place. And Mario Kart 8 in third on the Nintendo chart for the full year of 2023. That classic 2023 game.
I mean, there were new Mario Kart tracks. In
That's true. That's actually a good point. That's what pushed
it actually
those
makes
sales.
sense that it was in there the last 2 years. It's all the years prior that it makes sense.
Good point.
Now that we're in 2024, Mario Kart is nearing 10 years old, which is pretty crazy. But what really stood out to me is that this is the most games ever released on the Switch was in 2023, like you were just talking about. Market saturation is at an all-time high. eShop has never more desperately needed some content curation than it has right now. But
yeah, I'm surprised to see Hogwarts Legacy on this list on the Switch.
Yeah, it shot up, right? Just by when did it come out on the Switch? It was pretty recent, like November.
It was late. Yeah, it was late.
It's like a month or two ago. Yeah.
That's kind of insane how well it's done.
I mean, maybe just like the traction from other platforms, and then kids, like literally that's who I'm imagining plays this game. It's just children. I don't know.
Or more
Who do you think's buying it?
casual.
Yeah.
I wonder if it's more casual people that have a Nintendo but don't have other consoles.
Yeah, it's like the casual
Because-
turf market is what it's really going for.
Because
I want to
like
see.
I just think there's a lot of more casual Harry Potter fans that like, oh, there's a Harry Potter game. I would like to play that. Maybe don't know, like,
Yeah, a lot of Harry Potter fans like aren't big time gamers necessarily, and if they're likely to own a console, it is the Switch, right?
Yeah, that's kind of what
I feel like there's a huge Venn diagram of Harry Potter fans and Animal Crossing New Horizons people.
Yes.
People that bought the system just to play that game, and then they're like, "Well, shit, I still have this. I guess I'll get Hogwarts Legacy."
Yeah.
That's
I
my
think
guess.
that's a great guess.
hmm
That does it for the news section. We are going to take a short break, and when we come back, we're going to be talking all about books about video games. All right, we are back, and this week we are talking about books on the video
Book
game
club, baby.
on the video game podcast.
I hope you have your wine.
So, of course, we're talking about books about video games, both fiction and nonfiction that are about gaming, broadly speaking. There's obviously like strategy guides and books that exist like that, but we're kind of talking more broad strokes here about the industry or about video games as a medium and that sort of thing.
This is actually your idea, Adam, for a show topic. And it just made me realize like how many books about video games I have read and how many like really good books there are. Just using it as a narrative device in like the fiction section that we'll talk about, or just about the industry as a whole. There's a lot of really great ground to cover, and I'm interested to break some of these down with you guys.
Does anybody have one that they want to start with?
Right at the top of our list is the Jason Schreier book, Blood, Sweat, and Pixels. Really excellent kind of anthology of the creation of games. Really cool, like highs and lows.
Yeah, I love this book. I've read it. Well, I've read the whole thing only once, but I've reread a couple of chapters a couple of times because some of them I think are more interesting than others. I think the way it's done is really interesting too, where it is like a game, a chapter, right?
Oh, okay. That's kind of how it's laid up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So and he's conducted interviews over years, so you kind of follow like the development of some of these games. Stardew Valley and is one of them, and like Adam said, the highs and lows broadly of like all these different games, but then the highs and lows within each game too, right? In his interviews, and like Star Wars 1313 is in here too, like which a game that never came out. So it's
R.I.P. I was really looking forward to that game.
Yeah, cool. And it's a good read, even if you don't like all the games that he ends up talking about, because it's just so informative to hear the kind of the human side of the development process.
And it's a wide variety, right? Like I mentioned Stardew Valley, but like you have big games. I mean, all these games are kind of big, but like games that maybe weren't necessarily going to be big, right? Like some big ones.
Have any of you guys read Press Reset, the other Jason Schreier book?
No.
I don't hear that one talked about as much as Blood, Sweat, and Pixels. Is it formatted similarly? Okay.
It's more recent, and I think it's more about like the culture of making games. I better check this out, but like the volatility. They're just reading the blurb about it. It's like about the volatility of the game industry. So I'm guessing about studios failing and that sort of thing more, and maybe some. It sounds like and resilience, but that's kind of my understanding. I don't know if it's formatted the same way.
I think that's something, I mean, that he touches upon in Blood, Sweat, and Pixels for sure. Like how some studios like had a failure and they're trying to come out of that, or vice versa. But I've not read it yet. I'll put it on my list, but Blood, Sweat, and Pixels, even though I didn't like some of the chapters as others, it's definitely worth the read. Just interesting to like hear about the creative process. But then also like this game, I think that came out in either 2016, 2017. And we're only 7-8 years from when that book came out. And the industry is already like almost completely different. Just as it was interesting to read from the modern perspective and seeing how fast that the industry is shifting is like pretty wild. But it's another book. Like I would like a book I would like a update to, or even like a little like one like couple paragraph blurbs update to each section just to like know where it is at now. Because I mean, I think there's a BioWare chapter that's pre-Anthem, and it's just really interesting to read. I think it's Dragon Age Inquisition, the process of making that game with no context of the game they made right after. Or I don't even know if that was the game they made right after, or if it was Andromeda, the Mass Effect game, which was also not the most well received.
That was kind of the beginning of the downfall of BioWare, right?
So it's just like, interesting to read that they were having trouble making that game and then knowing the future. So I would love like a little bit of an update book is that's what I'm getting at.
Yeah, there's a book on this list, Game Over by David Sheff, which I think originally released in like 1993 or something. And so that's one that like later in the 90s like had an updated version. And I think he's even said that he might even be making an updated version to that as well. Although at that point, just write a new fucking book, if you know what I'm saying, right? I mean, like, what are you going to do? But yeah, Game Over, how Nintendo zapped an American industry, captured your dollars, and enslaved your children is a very early 90s title for a book. But I thought that one was funny. I think one of my favorite books on this list in the nonfiction section is Masters of Doom, How Two Guys Created an Empire and Transformed Pop Culture by David Kushner. This is an awesome book. I really enjoy this one. I think we've talked about this on the pod before about how this would make a great movie. I think this is actually optioned to be a movie, and I think they maybe even shot a pilot for a show or something. But I think I actually was doing research recently. I think that's dead in the water. But this is a story about John Carmack and John Romero, A Tale of Two Johns. It's about like the foundation of id Software and the creation of Doom. It reads like a novel. It kind of like is fast paced and kind of interesting. And I think it just is a really fascinating story about, two very different kinds of developers. And then like kind of how each one of them had strengths where the other one had weaknesses and how they kind of help each other out. And then it's any story about the kind of wild west of the early days of game development in the early 90s, late 80s is always super fascinating to read. So
this is another one I really would love a sequel to. And I think he's actually working on a follow-up to this now 20 years later, which is awesome because when this book leaves off is like the early 2000s, and John Romero and John Carmack have taken wildly different paths since then. John Carmack ended up going to Meta and Oculus, and then trying to develop for Meta the VR technology. And then John Romero is kind of almost just become like a celebrity of himself, of like just like living in the 90s in a weird way. But it's just like they're both like interesting people to read about on their own. So I'm like curious to see what an updated version would look like. And on the note of like a TV show, because this was supposed to be optioned as a TV show, and I think they did film a pilot. But basically Mythic Quest already did it now.
Right.
And I just don't see the need for this to be a show anymore, though I would watch. Yeah.
Yeah. I think it'd probably work better as a movie, to be honest. There's a couple books on here that were going to be turned into movies. But yeah, I know his new book is not actually a book at all. I think it's being released through his newsletter and like lots of little chunks online. It's called Masters of Disruption. I actually looked that up recently. I don't know if that's started yet or if that's about to start, but he's talked about that a little bit recently as well.
Console Wars is kind of similar sort of vibe to that. I haven't read Masters of Doom, but Console Wars is about Sega taking on Nintendo in the early 90s. Technically, it's not nonfiction, but it is like kind of a creative nonfiction take on what it was like to kind of launch the Sega Genesis and try to find success where Nintendo had a pretty strong market hold by the late 80s. It reads really quickly. It's a cool story.
You're right. The novelization of it. I mean, we're talking about it under nonfiction because it's kind of like a well-researched.
It's a nonfiction novel.
Like, in the beginning of it, the author says, I've obviously like created the dialogue here, but like otherwise this is, how it happened according to the people. And because of that, it really flows so well, and you get invested. And even as a Nintendo person, you kind of start rooting for Sega a little bit when you're reading the book because of the perspective of it and all that.
Yeah, that's a fun way that they kind of frame this book, is that like Nintendo is like the juggernaut behemoth giant, and then Sega is David with his little slingshot, the underdog, right? And so you do really want to see them succeed in the end. And what I think the coolest part about this book is like how they did that, like what it was about Sega's like attitude, marketing, and all that kind of stuff that actually like made them an alternative to Nintendo that kids actually wanted, right? And they somehow successfully made Nintendo seem lame, which nobody thought was possible back in the 90s, right? So it's a pretty good book.
We have on this list the book Extra Lives, Why Video Games Matter. And it's actually a book I started reading. We had a note on here at the top, like, go to your library. A lot of these books are at your library. And this book is at my library, and I checked it out. And then I just didn't finish it. And it's been a while. And I've been meaning to go back to it. But I don't know if anybody else is here has checked this out. But I haven't. I like the theme of it, if you will. And it's sort of like the good of video games. I mean, it's kind of, the subtitle is Why Video Games Matter, right? And so it's, I guess in a quote here, the validity of it is an art form, right? But not necessarily just singing video games praises, kind of in a more shades of gray, which I think is cool. But again, it's been a while since I read it, and I need to go back and finish it. So I don't want to like talk too definitively about what it says as its main thesis.
I've heard it's fantastic.
Yeah.
It sounds like it's a book that's kind of written for non-gamers also too. I mean, I think that's kind of what makes a good book about video games, is that we'll get to some of those, especially in the fiction section. But it's like, if you can make an engaging book that anyone can read other than just like a very small, like niche audience, that's when you have something good, while not like actively talking down to the people that are in that audience, you know what I mean? That are going to be looking for some real information on the topic.
Yeah, that's a good point.
I'll go down for a little bit further on our list. We got Nintendo President books. And I have not read all of these, but I did read Ask Iwata, which I absolutely adored. I've been reading a lot more nonfiction the past 2 years, and just really kind of interested in the creative process and how creative minds work, and how other people that I respect their work, how they got to that point. And Ask Iwata is great for that, because it's a bunch of short form articles that he wrote for a column, but it takes place over a large span of time. So you get to see like him talking about working at HAL, and how his philosophy of managing people at HAL, and then how he moved that over to Nintendo. And and it's like a really digestible and easy read, easy to pick up and put down. I absolutely loved it. And just like seeing the creative process for sure. But I have not read Reggie's book. Really, really want to. Have any of y'all read Disrupting the Game?
No, I didn't end up reading that. I'm really fascinated in the chapter about Pizza Hut, but that's a joke. Sorry, nobody laughed. That's fine.
I didn't know. Maybe there is a chapter about
there is. He used to work there. No, I've not read that one. I did pick up Impact of Iwata, which was by Lucas Thomas, who is the editor-in-chief of Nintendo Force. And I just got that in the mail recently. I haven't had a chance to read it yet, but I'll tell you what, that's a heavy book. It's like not very big and it's not too thick, but it's like the paper quality is like really high quality and the cover is really heavy. I was like, damn. But no, it's great. It's like in where Ask Iwata is all kind of like from Iwata's own words. Impact of Iwata is a much more kind of straightforward like biography of the man, but it's really like well illustrated and has lots of like little like side sections. It feels like a more in-depth issue of Nintendo Force that's all about like one guy, right? So it's a really interesting take on a book, and I would really recommend it from what I've flipped through so far, and I'm looking forward to fully reading it soon. I'd like to give a shout out to the Boss Fight book series. There's like 30 of these. Okay, yeah, you got one right there. Is that Baldur's Gate 2?
This is Baldur's Gate 2, yeah.
Yeah, very good. Yeah, it's very similar if you're familiar with the 33 and a Third series, which are like little books that are all done by different authors, and those books go into records, like music albums, right? This is the same thing, but for games. So, you can find one on all these different kinds of games. It's kind of deep dives into the development of them and release generally. The one that I've actually read is on Spelunky, and it's actually written by Derek Yu himself, who is the creator of Spelunky. And I think it's the only boss fight book that is written by the creator of the game. So it's interesting to hear just like his first person take on what it was like to actually develop it, right? And just kind of insight into the roguelike genre as a whole. But this is one where it's like, man, you could just go to the website, check out like any kind of book or any kind of game that interests you, and there's a whole bunch of interesting ones that I'd love to read at some point. But Boss Fight book series is really good.
Along that note, I mean, I have not read The Tetris Effect, but I did read Tetris: The Games People Play by Box Brown. It's a graphic novel, and it's mostly about the history of the making of Tetris, and then partly philosophical musings about why we enjoy playing games and the nature of play within humans in general, which I thought was really interesting to tie it specifically to Tetris, because Tetris at its core is like a pretty simple game. It's like, why is it so addicting? And then he kind of like delves into that as well. So I really like that. Have y'all read The Tetris Effect, or did you read Tetris Box Brown?
I've read both. Yeah. Back when I was trying to like develop a Tetris script before somebody else made a Tetris movie, I bought both of these books to do research. Right. And, essentially, the Tetris movie is a retelling of this same story that's in both of these books, but they're both fantastic. Tetris Effect is another one of those kind of nonfiction novels that kind of serializes it and makes it like very digestible. But yeah, the Box Brown graphic novel of Tetris is fantastic. And honestly, I would prefer reading that again to watching the movie again. The movie didn't quite do it for me. I think my time is not yet up on potentially making a much better Tetris movie at some point down the line, but because that last one didn't quite do it for me.
Yeah, both of these books are definitely on my list now that David has like Tetris pilled me.
Goddamn right. Who put this one on here? The Pure Invention.
Yeah, Pure Invention. That is maybe not strictly a video game book. It's kind of tangentially related because it's about the way that Japanese culture has kind of had this global significance. And part of that for sure is video games, but it's a really interesting, kind of surprising look at a lot of different things that we don't think about as like having kind of a Japanese origin. Super interesting read. I loved that one quite a bit.
Yeah. Who's the author of that?
Matt Alt.
Yeah, that looks fantastic. I'm also constantly blown away by like how much sway this tiny island nation like has on the entire like media landscape of the world. Just the sheer amount of media that they put out, and how, I mean, just having gone to an anime convention this past weekend, it's like I would love to read a lot more of the history of that.
Yeah, I mean, the book kind of starts post World War II, when they're like trying to sort of reconstruct their whole nation and their economy. So it's wild to think that they could go from that to having just this outsized impact on every culture worldwide.
Yeah, and I think maybe before we leave the nonfiction section, I do want to give a shout out to a book that I haven't read, but Summer brought up last week, and this is now on my radar, which is Marks at the Arcade, Consoles, Controllers, and Class Struggle by Jamie Woodcock, which, as we've been talking a lot about, hot labor summer happening over the past few years, and that's moving into video games. It seems like this is a great like leftist take on the video games industry and the many ways that unionization and organization within can be and should be happening within that industry. So definitely want to give that one a shout out, and I'd love to talk to Summer whenever they finish reading that book, because I'd love to hear if it's worth reading or not.
Yeah, I'm wondering if we should maybe cover like the other non-fiction sections we kind of have here first before moving into fiction. Would you all be down with that?
Yeah,
Sure.
totally.
I think it's sort of related. There are also lots of art books or coffee table books, which we talked about, maybe individual games have art books and stuff like that. But then there's just some industry ones. One that I have that I just wanted to shout out real quick that's kind of fun to flip through and has sort of an interesting detail is The Game Console by Evan Amos. It's I think he literally took photos of all of these consoles. Like, these aren't stock footage photos. Like, I remember when this was made, he like had to track down people that have all these old ones, like, because it really does go all the way back with like the Magnavox Odyssey and all that kind of stuff. And then it's just got lots of stuff I wasn't even aware of, like a bunch of weird handhelds from like the early 2000s. And
You're not aware of the Nokia N-Gage, dog?
No.
Side talking, baby.
Yeah.
And it's got like little weird accessories like the e-reader and stuff in here, and it's just kind of fun to flip through and have them all in.
I would call that a really important book in terms of like preservation of hardware.
Yeah.
And just how like detailed the photography is of each part of all of these different consoles as these things become like increasingly rare. I think the fact that he did that is commendable and super important.
Yeah.
It looks like they have kind of like blown apart insides of them as well. Exploded views. That's what it is. Thank you.
Yeah. See there.
Yeah, love that. That's super cool. And I think I actually read somewhere that a lot of those photographs from that book are now like in the public domain, or at least like
I think that was why he did that. I think they're all the Wikipedia
they're all online.
Images.
Yeah, exactly. So that's pretty cool that he put all the work in and kind of made that available for anyone to use.
One of the ones I got that I'm going to show here is the Bitmap Books Guide to Japanese Role-Playing Games, which is an absolutely beautiful book that has a whole bunch of information about JRPGs, from like the most obscure all the way up to like your Final Fantasies, Dragon Quest, Persona, stuff like that. And for me, the thing that I love about a book like this is how it provides so much context.
Mm-hmm.
I think context is like one of the things that will unlock art, things that like I didn't understand or didn't appreciate. I understand where it fits historically, and it's like all of a sudden I'm curious about these things, like these weird, I don't know, Japanese exclusive MSX RPGs that like I'll never play. It's super interesting to hear how developers made those and then go on to make, the games that we're all talking about in the Discord.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I mean, it's like there's a bunch of games that I don't care about on face value, but then I like hear a story about how it was developed, or a story about the creator of the game, or some kind of background, and I'm like, oh, well, now I want to play it. Like it's like what you were talking about, context. I think that is actually really, really cool, and I think that this, especially for someone who, I love the idea of JRPGs, but often have a hard time actually making my way through JRPGs. Reading about them sounds like right up my alley. These books look really great, although they are expensive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a whole series of these.
I also just got this one for Christmas this year. It's the handheld history published by Lost and Cult, and it is just a breakdown of different eras of handheld consoles, including the recently besmirched N-Gage. Patrick.
I flipped it to the first handheld I could find, that was a little more obscure. I thought.
Well, next you're going to tell me you never had an Xperia Play?
I hate Pokemon. I hate Dominoes and the N-Gage. Yeah. Anyway.
Wow.
Sorry, Adam, please continue. Anything else on that handheld history?
It's got great artwork and like personal essays from people about, trying to play Game Boy games underneath a street light as they're driving in the back of their parents' cars on road trips and stuff. It's like very much that nostalgia trip that I associate with handheld games.
Nice. Well, there's the other big category of nonfiction books would be like textbooks. And there are myriad textbooks, especially nowadays, with game design and game development actually having their own, departments in universities. But I have read a handful to edify myself, and I did want to mention a couple that I think have a more broad applications, because obviously I have read and worked my way through books that I wouldn't recommend as casual video game fan read, like game programming patterns and stuff like that. Yeah. But this book is one of them that I wanted to shout out, which is called The Art of Game Design. It's by Jesse Schell, who you might have heard of, Schell Games. They have their own studio, but they also make a lot of like big experience games at like Disney World and stuff. So a lot of his anecdotes are about making games like that. But to something you said earlier, I think, Jordan, when you were talking about the Tetris graphic novel, which I think is very true of this book, it has applications beyond games. Like reading through this, it's kind of, there are parts where I like learned stuff just about humanity, or you know what I mean, or about like, and he does this. He has this method in here where he goes through just over 100 different lenses. So obviously it's very applicable if you're trying to make a game, but he has different ways to think about your game or a game, right? And just all the different lenses are super fascinating. In particular, like he talks about like, one thing you need to think about is like, where are people going to play your game? And like, is your game a handheld game? Or is your game more suited to being played at the couch, like the sort of the hearth of the house? Or is it more like on the computer? And I don't think we always think about the environment of games. And that part really stuck with me. And because he was also like, and with esports, there's now kind of an arena game. There's like, and I don't know. There's a lot of other great things in there. So I don't want to blather on about it too long. But yeah, I had a couple other things on this list. I'll just hammer them out real quick. A lot more accessible and also a quicker read is this book called Level Up, which if you are all interested, it's a little more fluffy, I guess I would say. But it's a quicker read and it's about designing video games that also kind of like, I think if you're a more casual fan, you might like. And when I first started thinking about games, visually recommended reading Understanding Comics by Scott McCloud, which is about comic books. Has anybody ever read this book? Highly recommend this book also, just about like humanity and about visual perception. Because while it is geared towards people who are making or thinking about visual art and in particular comic books, he just kind of breaks down the idea of like how we process images and how like you can identify with things if they have eyes and a mouth, and like and just the way he explains it is just brilliant, and it's all done with sort of comics and stylings and stuff, and it really is great if you're interested in visual media at all, which video games obviously have a big part.
So that one's written in the style of a comic book?
Yeah, so it is like a nonfiction book about comics, but also, like I said, kind of broadly about visual art. But he's making visual art that demonstrates it, if that makes any sense.
Cool.
It's a really great book.
He's really disrupting the game on that one.
Pizza Hut.
The only thing I'll add to the textbook section is the book that I read when I was in college, Rules of Play, which I briefly took a video game writing class when I was at the University of Texas. Sheldon McCarty was the teacher. He was the writer for the original Deus Ex. And this was a lot more of just like a broad stroke, like game design fundamentals kind of textbook, right? But there's a lot of really interesting stuff on storytelling within it as well that we kind of used as a bit of the basis for his class. And a lot of that was obviously like nonlinear storytelling, player, and a lot of it came down to player agency and how you can use that to tell your stories. And that's the kind of stuff that I found interesting, especially somebody who wrote Deus Ex is going to, really get into that kind of storytelling instead of just the kind of straightforward stories. But anything where you can make choices and have branching pathways, that was a really interesting class. And anyway, Salen and Zimmerman wrote Rules of Play.
Also, when you were talking about the comic book, you reminded me there is a comic book I wanted to shout out called Game Boy Modding, A Beginner's Guide to Game Boy Mods, Collecting History and More by Greg Farrell. I've been following this guy on Instagram for a long time, and he started just like modding Game Boys, and now he has like his own Etsy shop where he does custom shells and all this other stuff. But he made an entire like comic book on how to mod your own Game Boys.
That's cool.
Which is just like super sick. He was like, well, one, I'm a visual artist. Like he has done other comics that I've read that are really good. He did one about a bookstore that you used to work at that had tried to start a union. That was a whole interesting book. But this one is just like really cool, like visual diagrams of like how to fix up your own Game Boy, which I was like super unique. Hadn't really seen it. And I kind of like, it just clicked in my head when you said understanding comics. So I wanted to give that a quick shout out.
Nice.
Oh, yeah.
Well, we can move on to fiction books now, of which there are some big ones. Who wants to take the lead here?
Yeah, I mean, maybe we could start with the book that kind of got us wanted to make this topic in the first place, which is Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow by Gabrielle Zevin. I just finished this book over this weekend. I really, really enjoyed it. I mean, if you're not familiar with the story, it's kind of a love story about two friends, right? It's kind of like not every love story has to be about lovers, right? And so it's these two like longtime friends that first bonded as children over their love of games, and then eventually grow to make games together and then form their own company. They make a big hit, and then it's kind of like the story of their lives and their relationship over the course of, I think it's 30 years or so throughout the book. And it's just really fascinating using video games as both a background and a setting and like the structure, right? It's kind of like, major milestones of their lives are determined by the games that they release. And it also, the kinds of games that they're working on at the time also say a lot about how they feel about each other and how they feel about themselves. It's a very fascinating book. It's really, really well written. And it's one that I just like, it's been a long time since I've just like slammed 150 pages of a book like in one sitting, but that happened to me multiple times while reading this one. It's not like a short book, it's pretty chunky, but it's really fantastic. It's a page turner, and it's also one that you can really recommend to pretty much anybody. I don't think you need any kind of knowledge of video games to enjoy this book. And I think that in a lot of ways, I think that this is a book that I would give to people that maybe have a hard time understanding what people see in video games, because it's easy, it's digestible, it's a love story. It's, I think it's been optioned for a movie. It's surely going to become a movie, but like, it just does such a good job of explaining what I've always had a hard time explaining, which is just like why I love video games so much and how the power of play can really impact interpersonal relationships and just make you learn more about yourself and explain a lot about yourself. I just love this book so much. I'm really sad that it's over. I know, Adam, you've read it before, right?
Yeah, I read it, and I felt very similarly. When I got to the end of the book, I cried, in part just because like I wasn't ready to not be with those characters. Like the character work in this book is excellent, and especially the way that the author captures those characters across time, I think is especially challenging. And for me, nothing hits harder than a story that evokes the way seasons of life change us. And the fact that like video games are kind of almost this lens through which we view the chapters of our lives as we move from one to the other, I think is just, like you said, it's not a story that is strictly about video games as much as it is about characters and the way that their lives interact or kind of intersect with the games that they play.
And create. Yeah.
And
It's
create,
like, I think it's a wonderful treatise on the kind of longing and the insatiability of creatives. You know, I think there's a line in it that I highlighted. And forgive me, Jordan, you haven't gotten to this part yet, but it's not a spoiler. But Jordan's also reading it. Spoiler alert. At one point, one of the characters says, you know, that boredom that you feel is what many of us call happiness. You know, and I think that is something that is so on the nose. It's like creatives always feel like they have to create in order to be happy, and sometimes slowing down a little bit is necessary and not pushing yourself too hard, right?
I haven't read the whole book. I started it, but yeah, that definitely resonates with some quote I saw recently from Jim Carrey, of all people, who's like, I wish everybody could get famous and be successful so that they realize that's not going to make you happy.
Yeah. One last thing I'll say about this is I really want to play Ichigo. Like all of the games that they describe, I just like want to play. I'm like, it sucks that this game is not real and it's just like written about in this book. Like I hope somebody makes it someday. I know one of the first games that the character Sadie, who's one of the main characters in the book, makes in college, it's called Emily Blaster, and somebody actually made that. You can play that online, which is cool. But yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not all the way done, but I'm probably about 70% of the way through the book, I'd say at this point. I'm listening to the audiobook. I have not listened to an audiobook in a long time. Shout out whoever did the voice on the audiobook. It's incredible. It's really, the person reading it does a great job. But yeah, no, just like what you're saying, just like the way it describes the characters over time. I love the descriptions of the characters because without telling you they are this, like, no, they describe like how they're feeling. And you can just get like a sense of these people just by the way they're described and how they act and they interact with other people, which is like a really hard thing to do. And I just really love the use of the video games as like metaphors for life. It's just like really beautiful. I mean, I feel like y'all both said it better than I could. But yeah, I'm really curious to see if this ever becomes a movie or something. But I know Gabrielle Zevin, I was like halfway, like not even halfway through. I was a quarter of the way through the book and I just like Googled her because I was like, I have to know who this person is because this book is incredible. And so I was like looking through and, you know, she does some screenwriting. So I'm hoping maybe she can screenwrite a book or screenwrite the movie or something like that. But anyway, just also like, yeah, the interplay of the creative process with two different people. It's like something I was talking about earlier. I'm just like really fascinated with like how the creative process works for different people. And just the way that she describes it feels so real. And she actually screenwrote a book or a movie that her partner made. And I was like really interested in that because now I want to see the movie because it feels like she's like basing some of the interplay of the relationship on her real life as well, which is cool to see. But I don't know if that's true or not. I haven't watched any interviews, but when I'm done with this book, I am going to go look up interviews of her talking about this book because I'm enamored. I'm so fascinated. But do y'all have anything else to say? Because I can segue into the next section.
Please
next
do.
Book. So I might have an unpopular opinion on this book, but the next book we have on here is Ready Player One. And I think this book is bad for the exact reasons why Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow is good. So like if you took video games out of Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow, it would still be an incredible book about the creative process and how love works with certain people and the way they describe the people has nothing to do with video games. If you took every reference out of Ready Player One, if you took literally all of them out, you have nothing. It is a insanely bare bones approach and only exists to serve its references. And I think that really annoys me. And I read this book, but I read it all the way through. So I don't know. You tell me what that means. Anyway.
I do not hate Ready Player One. I do think that this book gets a lot of hate. for my money, I found it to be a very entertaining and brisk read. I also enjoyed the movie. But I also think what I like about it, Jordan, is exactly what you don't like about it, which is that where Tomorrow uses video games as a backdrop for telling a larger story. This is just a game. Like, this book is formatted like a game. It's got levels, it's got boss fights, it's got like objectives, it's got all this kind of stuff. It's just like everything that happens in it is structured in the way that a game is structured. We did an episode on movies and what Hollywood has taken from video games. It reminds me of something like The Mandalorian, which is a show where it's like every episode you get an armor upgrade and you fight a mini boss, and it was just kind of like, I thought it was a cool way to just take video game mechanics and structure and force that into a different medium. And I just found it entertaining. Personally, I like the characters. This is also the second book on this list that Will Wheaton has read the audiobook of. He also read the audiobook for Masters of Doom.
Is the sequel to this book out?
Yeah, Ready Player 2. If you could believe that title.
I believe it. I believe it.
I think Ready Player 2 is actually a little bit better than Ready Player 1, because there actually is a little bit more characterization. Like, it starts out with, was it Wade, I think, the character from the first book, and he's kind of an asshole at this point in the story. So it's kind of cool to get a little bit of like actual storytelling, and there's kind of some, I don't know, not quite high concept, but there's some sci-fi stuff going on in that second book that's actually kind of interesting. So but I'm with Jordan. That first book, like, I read it and I did not get the hype. I mean, the references are fun. The movie was fun. If you want, I mean, I was there to see a Gundam fight Godzilla, which was pretty cool.
Yeah.
What's not to love? Come on, guys. You guys are overthinking this.
I was just like, I don't think I read it, and I read it so quickly. I read it within a few days, and because I just like couldn't put it down. And then like when I actually sat with it for about a month, I was like, I think I hate this book, but I couldn't put it down. So you tell me I don't know what that means.
Dude, I think that means you loved it. I felt the same way about Andrew WK for a really long time. I thought he was an awful musician. I was like, I hated his guts. But then his songs just kept being stuck in my head. And then I realized, oh, wait, I actually love Andrew WK.
And now he's married to Kat Denning, so he wins.
And he had like a really cool advice column for a long time.
That's true.
Yeah. Look, we all love Andrew WK. I would read a book by him.
Anyway, let's put back on track. We're going a little long. What else on this list do y'all want to talk about?
Yeah, so the next couple of books on this list, I put them there as kind of like a counterpoint to Ready Player One, because they have similar vibes, I think, but are better stories. The Impossible Fortress is kind of a similar story to Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow, where it's more of a YA kind of novel about some kids who end up kind of working through a game and they become friends. And then below that on our list, An Absolutely Remarkable Thing by Hank Green, and the sequel, A Beautifully Foolish Endeavor, are both, like, those books are really, really good, especially the first one. I don't know what it is about the Green brothers, but they are excellent writers. It's about a girl who becomes famous on social media because she like live streams the first human contact with a sentient alien that comes down as a robot, which is a wild concept. But there are some game related things that happen in both of these books. They're a great brisk read also that I highly recommend if you kind of like the vibe of Ready Player One, but with a little more depth, a little better characterization.
Nice.
I'll go for the next one because I've read most of this series. I read Ender's Game, the sequels. It's a book about school of kids being trained to lead armies against a alien race. Mm-hmm. And I don't want to spoil it, but the main conceit in the book is that he is using a video game to train to fight this alien race, basically playing kind like an RTS.
Unwittingly. Yeah.
Playing an RTS game, yeah. But I don't want to give Orson Scott Card too much more FaceTime.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
Move on.
Yeah, Orson Scott Card is kind of a bad dude. But as far as like, novels that are written about gaming, it's like this is kind of one of the classics, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's especially in the realms of science fiction. I think similarly, you could also talk about The Player of Games by Ian M. Banks. This is part of the Culture series. It's another science fiction, very future, set far into the future. But I'd like to give my final shout out of novels to one of my favorite authors, Neil Stephenson. He's written a lot that you could kind of call game stuff. Everybody knows him for Snow Crash, which is kind of about the metaverse and is one of the first kind of major cyberpunk fictions to really delve into virtual reality and stuff like that. But one of my favorite books of his that is intrinsically tied into games is Reamd. And this was a book that's kind of, if Snow Crash was him kind of doing a parody of William Gibson and the cyberpunk genre, I feel like this is him doing a parody of like, airport thriller novels that you would pick up while you're in the waiting line, right? Like
Dan Brown.
This is like something kind of like that, or James Patterson or something, or what is that his name? And this is like a techno thriller. It's got a lot of globe trotting and it's going from country to country and there's conspiracies to uncover and whatever. But kind of at the crux of all of this is this fictional MMO called Terrain. And I just loved that as like a main conceit of this game. Like one of the main characters is the creator of this MMORPG, and a lot of the story is told from his perspective, as well as the sequel, which is called Fall or Dodge in Hell. But this book in particular, Reamd, has a lot of really cool themes in terms of what modern MMOs are like. There's characters whose entire job is like gold farming. There's like these Chinese characters that they just farm in-game currency and then sell it, and that's kind of a black market that exists within this game, and that's kind of what starts a lot of the plot moving. It's a Neil Stephenson novel, and so because of that, this is a 1,000-page book. And he goes into long tangents, and but that's kind of what I love about Neil Stephenson. He's for me, that's a feature, not a bug, of a Neil Stephenson novel. But yeah, out of all of them, I think this is kind of one of his most readable and one of his like pulpiest and easy for anyone to pick up if you're not scared off by the sheer page count of the thing.
I don't know if this is the best way to close out, but I have a couple here that are kind of like more for kids reading books with kids. Because, read a book, or not entire book, but I read with my son every night pretty much. And one video game series, if you're out there and you have a kid in the roughly 8 to 10 range, I would say, that you might want to check out, is a book series called Trapped in a Video Game. It's not a literature, fine literature or anything, but it's definitely for kids. And the premise is that a kid gets sucked into a video game. And then it kind of gets out of control, to be honest with you. The first book is maybe better because it just gets more and more absurd, but it's kind of fun nonetheless.
I saw a copy of this book at Meow Wolf when I was there most recently, and I thought it was very fitting for the theme of Meow Wolf.
But a better perhaps recommendation, because I think adults would enjoy this one as well, is a manga series called Cat Plus Gamer. It's actually a D-pad on a lot of the art on the covers and stuff. So like the plus is, but and the cat's super cute. And it's basically this sort of Japanese woman that like all she does is play video games. Like she works and then rushes home and spends all her time alone playing video games. And then she adopts a cat. And as you might imagine, that kind of alters her life. And we've read 3 or so. I don't know how many there are total in terms of the volumes of them, but it's been really charming and delightful. And it's got lots of great video game references. She plays games that are basically like versions of Street Fighter or Monster Hunter or Final Fantasy, like non-trademarked versions. So it's a lot of fun to see all the references and that kind of stuff. As well, if you like cats, and it's just like a perfect fit because we like cats and video games over here. So yeah,
I like cats. I like manga cats.
Any final thoughts to wrap up our books episode? Anybody want to?
This is only a smattering. There's tons and tons of both novels and nonfiction books in this field. These are just some of our favorites, but we would love to hear if you guys have read any cool books too, just because I will take those recommendations to heart and actually read them.
Yep.
I want to know how we got to this point without you talking about the Mist novels.
Well, I mean, if we want to get into novelizations of video games, that would be a whole different topic, which, hey, we could do in the future. I love the Mist books, but yeah.
I did read a lot of the Resident Evil and StarCraft books when I was in middle and early high school, which I could probably dredge that. So next time.
Yeah, next time.
Well, with that, then we'll close out this topic and we'll take a short break. And when we come back, we'll talk about the games we've been playing recently. Well, I've played other games, but I think the main thing I wanted to mention is that we beat the Minish Cap over here. And shortly thereafter, I think we're on a Zelda kick. So we decided to fire back up Tears of the Kingdom. My son and I never beat it. We spent tons of hours on it. And then I went over to David's house one night and watched him beat it. So I felt pretty like I didn't beat it, but you were almost exactly where we were. So it was really like, I've seen it. However, we were like, let's go in and let's beat this game, but man, it is a tough game to not get distracted in. I feel like,
oh yeah,
we will very much. The thing is like, let's go do the next story beat, and then my son's like, but let me build you a car to get to there, and then that just turns into 30 minutes of driving around a vehicle or whatever. So we don't really get much done, but we're having a blast, and that's what counts. And that's pretty much.
You got to learn the speed route if you want to play the game more streamlined.
Well, every time it happens, I start to get a little frustrated, and then I'm like, he's having fun. We're having fun. Just have fun and don't worry about it. So anyway, that's pretty much the main thing that's been played over here.
I haven't been playing a ton, just been really busy, but after I rounded out my Super Mario RPG playthrough, I've been going back and playing Sea of Stars. Trying to round out that playthrough. I'm getting really close to the end. I'm going to 100% this game. So I'm getting really close to that. There's a couple things you have to do to kind of get the true ending, but I'm probably 3-ish hours out max. I was already pretty close to doing that anyways. So now I'm like, okay, I'm just going to finish it out. I'm still really loving that game. Still think it's better than Super Mario RPG. Still one of my favorite games of last year. Anyway, and then was that yesterday, David? We played Lethal Company.
Was last night.
B-Bon. And we had a great time. It's like so much more fun to play that game with 3 or more people. 2-player, you can kind of get the vibe or whatever, but when you have 3 people, it just creates these really unexpected scenarios that you can't really predict. Like 2 of us died to a giant sandworm eating us because we were walking too close together, and it just left one of us to just run to the ship and try to get away. And
me, that was me. No, yeah, I watched you guys get gobbled up by the sandworm, and I was like, "Fuck, okay." And then I had to pick up everything I could and go back to the ship. And then there were tons of monsters over there. I was really stressed out, but it was really fun. I made it. I was very proud of that. I feel like I finally am starting to understand the game. We played it the first time, and I was like, I don't really get what people like this, and now I get it. It's very fun.
Yeah, there's also a time where y'all had both died, and there was a piece of treasure that's tied to some dangerous bees, and you can pick it up, and it's worth a lot of money, but they had both died, and if everyone dies, bad things happen. I decided, well, they're watching me, and they can't tell me not to do it, so I'm going to go pick this up, and I just, as soon as I could communicate with them, they're like, we were just on the edge of our seats. David, you're like, why did you do anyway? Yeah, it was great. It's just such a fun game. But the other game I've been playing with my friend is Tiny Tina's Wonderlands. Picked this up on a Humble Bundle sale, and my friend convinced me to start a run with him with mods. I've never played this game, so I'm playing it straight through with mods. And at first I was so-so on it. I was like, it's fun enough as a Borderlands offshoot game. But now that my build is really coming together, I get the appeal. It's a lot of fun because it's kind of D&D style mixed with Borderlands. So it's you have magic, but then you also have guns, and they also have an interplay with each other. It's actually a lot of fun once you kind of get into it. A little bit mindless, but it's fun whenever you are working every day of your life and you just want to shoot things mindlessly for 2 hours.
Borderlands is fun online, man. Those are fun games. I'll go next. I'll go pretty quick here. I have been playing recently the Legend of Zelda PC port, also known as the Ship of Harkinian. Finally got that installed on my Steam Deck properly. And man, this is just the best way to play Ocarina of Time, bar none, hands down. I have the Super Mario 64 PC port also on my Steam Deck, which is a great way to play that as well. Ship of Harkinian, you can do tons of quality of life features. The first of which is it doesn't run at 20 FPS. You can run it all the way up to 90 FPS on the Steam Deck OLED. You can do HD textures, which I have installed. I have the right stick as an unlocked camera. Patrick.
Yeah.
I know.
That's my biggest complaint about Ocarina of Time. I hate it.
Absolutely. Yeah, you can just set the right stick to be a normal functioning free camera, which is really great. It's got lots of quality of life, like fast climbing. King Zora scoots over a lot quicker. Lots of stuff like that. But it's yeah, I know, right? Needless to say, it's the best way to play the game, and I'm really enjoying that. It's been a while. I've been playing more Picross 2 and Control, but I'm not going to pull up a video for those. Super Hexagon is a game that I have always been playing throughout my life. Terry Kavanagh joint. This is one of my favorite games of all time. This is a game that I've always said that this is a game that like people in the past would think that games in the future would look like. You know, like someone in the 80s would be like, oh, games in the future will be so futuristic. They're picturing this, but it's like a very simple game, but it's very fun. It's kind of hard to describe, so maybe just watch the video version or look it up if you can. But I finally beat the hexagonist difficulty, which I have not been able to do for 13 years. And I sat down and actually went through it and beat it, and was very proud of myself for doing that, because it took a very long time for me to do that. Next, I picked up a game yesterday for like $5. It's actually on sale. It was like $4.50. It's called Picayune Dreams. I believe that's how you pronounce the word Picayune. I've never actually said it out loud. But it's a what I will call Vampire Survivor, like one of the many new genres from last year, including Suika likes and Hike likes. And got to give a little shout out to that category that we cut from the Golden Heads Awards. But Picayune Dreams is a ton of fun. I mean, it's at its core a Vampire Survivor type game, but it's got so much style. I bought it for the music alone. Like the music from the trailer, I was like really vibing with. And then it's just got like a really frenetic style, and it's like sci-fi, cyberpunk kind of aesthetic. And then it also has these like really psychedelic kind of cutscene type extra, almost top-down RPG scenes that happen as well as like really cool boss fights and really robust skill tree as well. So if you're looking for a Survivors like, I would really recommend Picayune Dreams. That one is a ton of fun. And then lastly, I'll just say I tried Golden Sun very briefly on NSO. I just started it and then went back to reading and watching TV. I will play through this more at some point. I'm not just completely abandoning this. Maybe I am. I don't know. But I didn't give it enough of a try. I really just turned it on and checked it out, and it does run on the Switch. I'll tell you that. And I'm enjoying what I've played so far. What about you, Adam? What have you been playing recently?
Yeah, short for me, I just rolled credits on Ni no Kuni last night, which was fantastic. I mean, it's such a whimsical JRPG with art from Studio Ghibli, music by Joe Hisayashi, a game about coming to terms with loss and growing up and community. So many different like functions of like human existence, but in the like childlike fairy tale-esque way that Studio Ghibli and Level 5, the developer, are so good at. Really excellent game if you like JRPGs, particularly if you enjoyed Dragon Quest VIII on the PS2 and 3DS. This is kind of a similar vein to that.
Let me ask you a question. How long was your playthrough?
Probably 40, 50 hours. Something like
Perfect.
that.
Sounds about my
it's
speed.
reasonable. Yeah.
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 Y'all are crazy. I see a 50-hour game and I'm like, I can't even do that.
It's still a lot, but it's more reasonable than 100, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
I did not know Joe Hisaishi did the soundtrack to this. I've been pretty much playing the Boy and the Heron soundtrack on loop. That's been my go-to reading soundtrack to have on in the background. I love that soundtrack so much.
All right, then that's going to do it for this episode on books. Thank you so much, Adam, for coming and joining us and talking to us about books. Thanks to MilkyWay.co, who does our website. Thanks to Corduroy, who does our music. If you're looking for me, Patrick, you can find me online as PDYX.
You can find me online at Bordan.
I'm pretty much everywhere on the internet at Monolith Fiji. And what about you, Adam? Where can people find you online?
You can find me on Twitter at Adam McDorman, ranking every video game that I've ever played.
Very good. You still working on that YouTube channel, Adam?
Not so much. Not so much.
Okay. Well, forget I said anything. If you'd like to find our show on social media, we are at Switch Headz on Twitter. We are at Super Switch Headz on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok. And we have a website, switchheadz.com. And we have a Discord and a Facebook group. We'd love to have you join both of those. Please join us on the Discord. We'll have the links to both of those in the description of this episode. That's going to do it on this episode, man. What a great time. I'm glad we talked about books. Look, everybody, we know how to read. We do not just not know how to read. We know how to read as well. That's not a great sentence. We're literate. This is a fun book club. We'll have to do another one of these sometime. We're going to be back next week with another great episode. We already have a great guest lined up. Can't wait for you guys to listen to that one. But in the meantime, gang, you guys know the drill. You guys stay safe out there. Be kind to yourself. Be kind to one another. Read a fucking book. We love you guys very much. We'll see you next week. Bye-bye.